Welcome back to the South by East podcast. We're excited to be back here where we talk about the culture, the scriptures, and everything in between. This week, we have a really interesting clip, man. John, you shot this to me. Tell us a little bit about this clip.
Yeah, you got a popular artist, and this is, man, I hate to say it, it's starting to become commonplace of whether it's a well-known speaker or a Christian artist or author or just a leader in the church who comes out and says, it's all trash, it's all fake, I denounce everything, and I'm gonna tell you why, right? And they drop these things, and so this is me and you are both into Christian hip hop. This is a popular Christian artist who just came out and said, I no longer believe.
Yeah, man. So let's see what he has to say
Yeah.
for himself. This is an Instagram post.
That I no longer believe the claims of the Bible, and that includes Jesus being God. I don't believe the resurrection. I don't believe that it was made up by those who missed him, those who were used to deifying great leaders in their eyes as customs as people did back then, you know. And ultimately because what I read in the scriptures, the stories, people, places, and things, when, in the face of objective reality, don't hold water.
Man, that last statement, the things that we believe when faced with objective reality don't hold water. There's a study that Tim Keller did at one point where Tim Keller is a really large pastor in New York. And he said at one point he went around to people that had been a part of his congregation, people that were there that had left the faith. And he said as he interviewed people who had left the faith, he asked them, why did they stop being Christians? And he said, the majority of them said, we actually still believe in Jesus. We still believe in the resurrection. Yeah, I still think that could have happened. And he said, so why did you leave the faith? They said, because I never saw anybody living out the things that we said we believed. And in a lot of these stories, I don't want to speak for JR. I'll let JR speak for himself. But in a lot of these stories, when you start digging into it and you start hearing more and people start sharing more about their experience, what caused them to leave the church or to leave the faith wasn't so much a crisis of their faith, but a crisis of not seeing the objective reality around them line up with what they say they believe.
So the thing that got me is I don't even have an Instagram account. Somebody sent the post to me, and I watched it. I sent it to you, and then they were like, "Man, did you see the comments?" I was like, "I can't see the comments. I'm not on Instagram."
Comments
So
are crazy. I was gonna get to that. Yeah.
they shot me some comments from some of the people, not just everyday, but some of the other people in Christian hip hop. And man, it was so encouraging. And here's why. I remember being in college, and man, I was serious about my faith in college. And I got more and more serious about my faith. I started feeling my call in the ministry in college. And I remember the first time somebody kind of in our friend group was like, "Man, I don't believe." And I was like, "What? What? What?" And I started to go in. But one of my friends who had been walking with Christ longer, like, did me like this, like she shushed me, man. She shushed me in front of everybody. She was like, shush. And she started like lovingly, like asking more questions and leaning in and like asking about their story and what happened and how did they get to this point and different things of that nature. And I was like, oh, right.
Oh,
And
that's how
so,
we respond.
like now, like you're like, I've been around a lot more people who don't believe, and it's always like, okay, like, man, tell me more. And why do you believe like that? And why, like, what caused you to be at this place? And like listening to the story and engaging. And I think I saw like screenshots of like Lecrae and some of those guys that just like lovingly.
Yes.
This is somebody who worked with them, who's on music with them, who's on albums with them. They just can't go delete everything that they've been a part of with this person. And instead of being like, let me tell you where all your theology is flawed. Let me give you all these historical,
Accounts
archaeological facts
Right.
about how this is true, and we can prove more of this than the Odyssey and the Iliad, and we can do all these things. And they said, we love you.
Yeah.
We love you. We love you. And knowing that, man, there's no so. I'm gonna tell you something. In the same way that a man don't wake up one day and just feels like I'm gonna walk away from my family and totally be done with everything without some kind of deep hurt there, you don't just wake up and say, this whole system of beliefs that I had, I just no longer believe without some kind of deep hurt there. And at that point, a person doesn't need convincing. They need compassion. And part of that means just enough to say, I love you. And if you want to talk, I'll listen. And I'm lean in and hear your story. And I don't have to condemn you. And I don't even have to agree with you. And you don't have to agree with where I sit at. But right now, where you at in this place of hurt, I love you.
Man, yeah, the comments were big for me. You know, a lot of times Instagram's cool because you can't listen to the video and read the comments at the same time. I don't have an Instagram account either. I was like, oh, I can't. I got to actually watch the whole video. But I went back and jumped into those comments, man. And Lecrae said this specifically. He said, the tomb is still empty. The Spirit of God is still at work. Then he says some things in Hebrew, and I'll speak Hebrew, so I'm not gonna butcher those. Then he says, let us remember to pray and not cast judgment. Man, we're right now on the other side of another election cycle.
Yeah.
And I've been engaging in some comment sections of just some. There have been some spiritual leaders who have shared, hey, here's how I'm voting, and this is what I think. And I didn't always agree with them, but I jump in the comment like, hey, I really appreciate you having the courage to share where you're at. That's it. And I had somebody really come at me in the comment like, man, you should be champion, and you should be, and how could we ever as Christians go in? And I was like, hey, man, like I needed a second, and I ended up not being able to respond immediately. And I came back and I was like, hey, brother in Christ, I love you. At the end of this, I really said kind of the same. Tomb's still going to be empty. No matter who sits in the Oval Office, Jesus will still be on the throne. And when you have that kind of hope, you have the capacity and the margin to sit with people in their hurt because you know that your hope is still alive, and you can be a reflection of that light in their life.
Yeah.
Because you have a hope that doesn't die. My hope doesn't ride on Johnathan Sublet. Love John. And if John ever walked away from the faith, boy, that would hurt my heart something fierce, but it would never shake the hope that I have. And I would then be able to share that hope with him. And I believe he would do the same thing for me.
So, Brail, I'm about to age myself.
Yeah.
I'm old enough that I remember when this brand new technology came out called Blu-ray.
Okay.
And I remember
Blu-ray.
being in Best Buy, and I was walking by TV, and I said, man, they got people behind this screen playing in this box. These people look realer than I've ever seen before. And they had this movie showing that, and I end up not buying a Blu-ray player. I end up waiting because I knew that the technology would get cheaper. And then it took a long time to load. And then Sony PlayStation came out with the Blu-ray player on there who loaded faster. So that's why I ended up buying that to do that. But the movie that they sold me on, one was Kung Fu Panda. And then there was this other movie that they used to sell me on the Blu-ray technology. And it was this movie called The Kingdom of God. And it was about the battle for Jerusalem between the Crusaders and the Muslims. And there's one line I ended up buying that Blu-ray when I got my Blu-ray player. Yeah. There's one line in the movie that's the crux of it that I always remember. And he said, the lead guy that was leading kind of the Christian army got to a point where he was just like, man, I've seen too many people die, walk away. He's like, if God is God, then he can fight for himself. He's like, we are killing so many people trying to defend God.
But if God is God.
And then here just recently, right? I made a post from one of the devotionals I read each morning is With God Daily by Scottish Honey. And he posted here recently talking through some of the Psalms about how any God that needs us to defend them is not a God at all. What happens, I feel like sometimes is, man, and it shows when you feel like you have to defend your God all the time, that you're not really serving the God of the universe, but you're serving an idol. And man, I think what happens sometimes, what keeps us from really being a reflection of the God that we say we serve, is that we feel a need that we have to defend him. The tomb is still, the tomb is empty.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with me or not, the tomb is empty.
empty.
And so you know what? Because I know that, I don't have to defend it.
Yeah.
And if you say differently, that's okay. But you saying differently don't make it true.
Make it true.
And so I can hear you say that, and I can say, all right, well, how do I love you in this moment?
Right.
Because maybe if I show you the love that I've received, then maybe one day I have enough voice where you ask me, why would I still believe that after all the things you said to me?
And it's, as much as, there are a lot of facts. There's a lot of facts to the Bible.
Yes.
There's a lot of facts archaeologically, historically. It's out there. But belief in Christ for the earliest disciples was experiential.
But
It was
Brail,
experiential. They walked with Jesus. They experienced his love. They saw how he reacted. They saw how he responded. They walked with a man that showed them what it looked like for God to be among us. And he's charged us to do the same thing.
But Brail, you know my background is what? What was
Chemical
that?
engineer.
I was a chemical engineer. Okay,
Project
bro.
manager.
All
Yep.
right. So here's the deal. One, you don't put scientific proof alongside historical proof because historical proof is not repeatable.
Yep.
That's the first thing you have
So
to.
it doesn't fit into the scientific method.
it-
If a lot of people don't understand that, if you cannot repeat it, it's not science.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's like it's a historical proof, and we take that with everything. He's like, well, somebody didn't resurrect from this. It's like, hey, we still believe that there was earthquakes in California in a certain date.
right.
But we're not repeating those
Can't repeat
earthquakes.
those. Right.
It's a historical proof. Now, here's the deal. How does something... Science is based on this thing called the scientific method. And what you do is you start out with this theory, and you try to set up an experiment in a way that has as many controls as possible in one variable. And you try to repeat this thing over and over. When you have this ideal of how things work, but it's really unproven, it's called a theory.
Right.
And you test that and test that and test that to see until you can get it to repeat. And then based on when you can get something to repeat over and over again, you pass it to becoming a law.
Right.
But a law doesn't necessarily mean that that's the
it's true.
truth. It just means that you haven't found yet a circumstance in which it
Not
differs.
true. Yes.
And so, because there's things that have been made laws before, but then later on we found out more things later that say, oh, that really wasn't true. There was something else that we didn't know. We didn't have the science to really describe then, right? And so, for us to adopt something as a law, it still takes a matter of faith because we have to trust that we know that all we can know at the time. And so we put our trust in what we know at the time to say how things are going to happen in the future. So whether you're doing science or whether you're doing history, because what happened historically, a lot of us were not alive at some of those things. The Civil War, the American Revolution. We have history books that told us that happened.
We weren't there.
But we were not there. And so we're still basing historical proof on
faith.
faith. So even when I read the scriptures, let me tell you something. I've done enough study. I've paid a Bible college and a seminary enough money to have some papers on the wall
Right.
to know a couple of facts. And I still know that at the end of it, I can know all the stuff they taught me in those classes and know that it comes down to a matter of faith still at the bottom of it.
Yep.
And so how did I get to that point? I have just chosen what I was going to put my faith in.
Chose.
Just like another person. And you know what? They might not be where I'm at in my journey, and they might not ever be where I'm at in my journey. But that doesn't mean that I get to devalue them or say they have less worth or less dignity because of it.
That's right. And man, that word right there, to choose. God gave human beings the right to choose, to follow him or not to follow him, to believe in him or not to believe in him. It is everybody's right. That is the only, I'm convinced that's the only real God-given right, is the right to choose. And God gave us the right to choose. And at some point, you choose what you believe in.
Yeah.
That's just the truth. You choose what you believe in. And if I truly value you the way that God values you, I won't devalue your choice. I won't devalue your choice. I'll choose to love you, even if you choose to walk away from something else that I love. But what do y'all think, man? Let's hammer it out in the comments. Keep it classy, folks. But we appreciate the community that y'all have helped us build. Continue to comment, like, and subscribe. And we'll see you next week
In the intersection.